1945, as bombs fell over Europe, savage battles in the Pacific turned small islands into mass graves. America was out to avenge the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, while the Japanese were fighting to expand an empire. Both sides were taught to hate and trained to kill. The fighting in the Pacific was brutal, close range, relentless. And for the young men in uniform, Japanese, all American, the idea of making it through the war alive seemed nearly impossible.
I joined the Marine Corps in 1943 when I was 17 years old.
Marty Connor was sent to Hawaii to train as part of the 5th Marine Division. In February 1945, they were tapped for a special assignment.
We traveled only a day, I think, or a day and a half, and we were off of Iwo Jima. I went outside, and I could see flashes on this landing of shells being fired from the ships and landing on this island, which is Iwo Jima.
Iwo Jima, only 1,000 kilometers away from mainland Japan. The Americans wanted the small island for its airstrips, while the Japanese were prepared to fight to the death defending it. Among them, Tsurugi Akikusa.
I saw ships going around the island. They were traveling, trying to decide the location. The number increased, and they lined up like a train. I was so impressed. It looked like the whole Pacific Fleet was there.
We circled and circled and circled until about our wave, first waves went in, I believe, about 9 o'clock, and our wave was the third wave. We went in sometime after that, but just shortly after, really. And we landed in what is called Red Beach 2, which is right almost at the base of Mount Suribachi. And I can remember it well. I remember the ramp going down. I was the 5th person back on the right-hand side. I went out, I followed the person in front of me. I veered to the right along the beach in the black sand.
From Suribachi's 500-foot elevation, enemy mortars hold the entire island in range.
I can remember vividly coming across and seeing this small shell crater. And there were 2 Marines in there, and they were like 18 years old. They both were dead. They were grayed out they bled out, and they were gray. We had these terraces on our left. The terraces were maybe 15, 20 foot in length and height. And you had to crawl up them, and it was almost impossible to run up them because you would sink in the sand up to your knees. And out of the sky, I hear this whoosh coming down, because you could hear a mortar coming down when it was right above you. And this shell came down and hit right next to myself, and it covered us with black sand, and shrapnel went through my pack.
They felt there was not much opposition there, that we would probably take that island in 5 days. They didn't understand that there was a network of installations underground, and that's where the Japanese were. They were not above ground, they were underground.
I worked in the main cave at first. It was the largest dugout in Iwo Jima, which could hold 800 people maximum. The Americans put water and gasoline in the dugout, and then they set it on fire. The hell. I don't know the words to describe it. A bomb landed in front of me, then on the sides of me, but finally it hit here. There was no medicine or anything, and they just let me lie down, but I had pain all over my body and couldn't get any sleep. I would have killed myself if I had had a grenade or something. I was really thinking, this is the place I should die. I don't know how many days passed.
I was on Iwo for the full 36 days of the conflict. I could never picture myself actually walking off the island. I never could. I tried to, but I couldn't. Too many things happened. I had too many close calls.
Iwo Jima would prove to be one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. The US Marines lost more men on that island than any other battle in the war, and out of 22,000 Japanese troops fighting there, little more than 1,000 survived. Many Japanese survivors, including Akikusa, became prisoners of war, while many American survivors left the island with haunting memories and mementos.
These mementos, or these, as the soldiers called them, souvenirs, were often taken off bodies, seconds, minutes after a guy had died. They would go to a guy they'd killed and remove these almost as trophies. At that time, I think those guys saw it as the way it was. They did not see it as any sort of transgression.
Japanese flags were a very popular thing to get. Every Japanese soldier had a flag around his waist, Japanese flag, underneath his uniform. And those flags had a big red circle on it, but then it had black writing. Relatives had sent good wishes with him, and friends could, and so forth.
A lull in the fighting, you scavenge around a little bit where you are because you're in a certain position there. I picked up off of one Japanese, I took something that looked official. It was his pay records. And then a diary, I found a diary. And then in the helmet, you'd find pictures of his family and if there was writing on them. So I took things like that and just stuck them in my pack.
Connor returned home after the war, where he locked the souvenirs away. They would remain there, untouched, for 25 years. But a return trip to the very place it all began would change Connor's life forever. In 1970, Marty Connor stepped onto the black sand beaches of Iwo Jima for the first time since World War II.
Some of the Marines were getting together and having a reunion on the 25th anniversary of our landing, and I had a call if I'd like to go, so I thought, yes, I would like to go back. A lot of Marines still feel that way, that they don't want to go back.
He took his wife to show her the place that had such an impact on his life.
I could not believe when I stood up on top of Suribachi and looked down where that division came in, and so many of his friends were injured and killed, and I could not believe that he made it through all that, because those guns were looking right directly down on that beach. So I felt that God was looking over him, and someone was certainly taking care of him through all that.
And at a ceremony there on top of Mount Suribachi, Connor shook hands with the Japanese men who had once manned those guns.
They suffered, we suffered, they knew it, we knew it. So we didn't come there to rub it in or anything like that. We came in there to tell them what brave soldiers they were, which they were. And our people, our Marines were, just as brave.
On that whole trip, I met some Japanese family people, just like Marty and I and our family. They were no different. They just wanted to know what had happened to their men and their children.
Working to find those answers was Captain Tsunezo Wachi, a Japanese naval officer who became a Buddhist monk after the war. He devoted his life to those who lost theirs in battle. Little did Marty Connor know how much Wachi would change his life with a simple request for American veterans to return souvenirs they'd taken from the battlefield.
He was the contact to the bereaved families of the Japanese, and he devoted himself to returning whatever was sent back to him, to making the effort of finding the families and to returning them. And this was so very important.
There was a depth to Marty that when he came home and looked at these things that he had in a drawer, he began seeing them as extensions of a human being.
Within weeks, a letter from Japan showed up in Connor's mailbox. Wachi had located most of the families from the names on the items and returned them.
He says, "Dear Martin Connor, it took about 3 weeks to find out the proper bereaved family of the war dead who was described in your letter dated March 31st, 1970. According to the town office, the grandmother of the war dead among the family is still alive with the age of 103 years, who is the oldest person in the prefecture, and delight and gratitude of the family were quite beyond description." I was pleased because he brought closure to those families, and I helped out. Oh, I was happy. Got another Japanese flag in here.
Word of Connor's success began to spread, and soon packages of souvenirs from veterans around the United States were arriving on Connor's doorstep. And so, for the past 40 years, he's been sending the spoils of war back to where they belong. 8 years ago, in Buffalo, New York, Shannon Moore was cleaning out her mother's shed.
I remember there were 2 jars on the floor, and there was this rag, I don't know, behind these jars. It was wrinkled up, and I just picked it. Honestly, I thought it was a rag, and I went to throw it out. And my hand was over the garbage can. I remember this, and I just stopped. And for some reason, I just unfolded this, ball of silk, or this material, and I was just, oh wow, this has to be something, from the war. And I took it into my mother's house then, and I showed my husband, and he was all excited, and he said, "Don't you know what that is? It's a Japanese battle flag," he said.
She knew the flag could have come from only one place and only one person. Moore's father fought in the Philippines during World War II. He died in 1975. Moore was only 10 years old.
I don't recall him ever speaking of the war. I'm sure it was very traumatic for him, and he just never spoke of it. And as a little kid, growing up, I didn't really think about it either.
Moore began researching the significance of the battle flags. She also learned that veterans in the US were trying to return flags and other items back to those families.
We took it to the university because just out of idle curiosity, we wanted to know what the flag, what was written on it, if the soldier's name was on it, so if there was going to be any way we could locate the family. Professor Shimojo translated everything for us, and he also located an agency in Japan that returns these artifacts back to the soldier's family.
At the newspaper, the Syracuse Post-Standard, Sean Kirst heard about Moore. His first thought was of Marty Connor, whose story he'd been following for more than a decade.
I read about Shannon in the Buffalo paper that she'd come into this flag and wasn't sure what to do with it, that she'd taken it to a translator, I believe. And so I contacted her and just told her about Marty.
At this point, I know I wanted to return that flag to Japan, but something, I was wondering, is this what my father would have wanted me to do? That hung over me. And I said that to Mr. Connor, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, your father knows what you're doing." And it just took that to hear that from Mr. Connor. It was okay, it's gonna be okay, I know what to do, this is the right thing to do.
A Japanese delegation, including Masataka Shiokawa, came to Syracuse, New York, to make the exchange in person.
It was the first time I'd ever met an American soldier. I remember I was defensive in the beginning. I thought, these are the people who killed Japanese soldiers. But as I spoke to him through the interpreter, I understand that Marty wanted to return the artifacts with respect to the people on the other side of the war. So gradually I started to understand his feelings, although we could not understand each other's spoken language.
We didn't have any trouble. We got along famously, and we had lunch together, and he was encouraged and excited.
It just blew me away to see these old Marines who had made this emotional leap from this traumatic, hateful situation into this kind of beautiful forgiveness. I mean, it was just such a gesture of humanity.
After Connor handed over several souvenirs, it was Shannon Moore's turn.
It was such an emotional moment for me. I just started crying. I don't know if I felt like this is so final, I'm turning this over. This was something that I thought was part of my father, but you know what, it really never was part of him. It was someone else. And I'll tell you, at the end of the day, it felt real good, because I know we did the right thing.
There are other veterans who do not agree with this and who still carry around that hatred. And even in my time, I've seen veterans who still show no respect for the Japanese, who were still so wounded emotionally by the experience. But the thing that really surprised me, I guess, is that there are so many people out there, even in their 80s, who can get catharsis out of returning these artifacts, who can, and at the end of their life, come to peace with their war.
Only a few months after that meeting, a letter from Japan arrived in Moore's mailbox. Shiokawa had successfully returned the battle flag.
They located the Japanese soldier who wore that flag in battle, Junichi Kodama. They located Mr. Kodama's nephew, and they sent me pictures of them presenting the flag to Mr. Kodama. It was beautiful.
In Japan, 10,000 kilometers away from upstate New York, Masataka Shiokawa receives a new package.
いいですかね。これがアメリカのマーティン・コナーさんから。
Inside are the flags, dog tags, and photographs Connor has received from other American veterans of the Pacific World War II battles.
江藤さんも、いやこれ
Look at how well preserved these are. This one had blood on it. Most of them come back like this.
The next step in returning these items to the families of the dead Japanese soldiers who once carried them in battle now belongs to Shiokawa. Today, he's in Tokyo meeting with government officials at the Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare, where he finds the answers he's looking for.
We can tell this belongs to Taro Yamada. This is from Iwo Jima. Mr. Connor's letter says this was found on Iwo Jima. The Ministry of Welfare and Labor says there is only one Taro Yamada who died on Iwo Jima.
Masataka Shiokawa is passionate about his work because his motivation is personal. When Shiokawa was only a week old, his father was sent to fight the Americans at Okinawa on August 15, 1944. Less than a year later, his father was killed.
日本政府から来たのはね。
All I received from the Japanese government was a small box about this size with some small stones from Okinawa in it. A small box like this, yes. It had writing on it. Soul stone from Okinawa, that's all. I'm sorry. I always get like this when I talk about my father.
Every day, Shiokawa wondered how his father had died. When he was 32, he made a trip to the caves of Okinawa. What he saw there inspired him to dedicate his life to bringing respect to Japan's war dead and closure to their families.
だから最初はね、
In the beginning, I was looking for my father's remains and personal effects very hard. But as I started returning things to other families, I realized that it's not just me who feels this way. So I began to think about locating the bereaved families of the remains.
A few weeks after his trip to the ministry with Connor's latest shipment, Shiokawa is on another mission. A Japanese soldier named Rihachiro Shizuka wrote a postcard to his family during the war, but died before he could send it. Shiokawa found it in a warehouse of war artifacts. It has taken him 8 years to track down a family member, but Shiokawa never gave up on the case, and today it pays off. Shiokawa is meeting the soldier's 85-year-old brother.
My brother sent me a postcard. There's no one else left to receive it now, so I'll take it and keep it in good care. I didn't expect this would be coming back after all these years.
I feel relieved. The heavy responsibility has been lifted from my shoulders, and I feel light. His brother was happy. This energizes me to push myself and work hard for the next case. It's a routine.
That fulfillment is what keeps him going from case to case and family to family.
やっぱり本人がね、
They're pleased as if the person actually came back. They cry and put the item at the family Buddhist altar and offer prayer.
At one such altar in Nagano sits a white shirt in a frame. Shiokawa helped return the shirt in 2005 to the nephew of a Japanese soldier killed during the war.
As you can see, this is the parcel tag, but it's in English. I can't read it.
Before the shirt was returned to the Nagami family, it had been sitting in the home of Marty Connor for 60 years.
I had a shirt. This is a picture of the shirt. I had picked this up on the west side of Iwo Jima on the third day or fourth day. And I took it from the pack. There were 3 Japanese that had been killed by naval gunfire. And I had taken it from the backpack of one of them. And I just threw it in my knapsack and didn't think any more of it.
For all those years, Connor thought the shirt had no identification. Eventually, he decided to include it with a shipment to Shiokawa. From what Connor thought was just a laundry mark on the shirt, Shiokawa was able to ID the soldier and find his family.
It's traveled so far, so long, for more than 60 years. I think my uncle's soul is feeling the comfort. He must be thinking, at this altar, I finally made it back to my home and my family. He's the brother of my father. All of the family ancestors are dedicated here. I wanted him to rest in peace with the rest of the family.
Marty Connor and Masataka Shiokawa are an unlikely team. They're 2 men from different countries once engaged in a bitter war. Connor doesn't speak Japanese, and Shiokawa doesn't speak English. But together, their work is helping families mourn lost loved ones after suffering from decades of grief and unanswered questions.
That's what we're endeavoring to do, is to bring a closure, send these things back, and perhaps bring a little joy to a Japanese family.
Although their American comrades were maybe killed by Japanese soldiers, they are taking care of artifacts of the enemy soldiers so well. I feel like these are gifts from a tragic history.